Hi friends, welcome back to my channel and thank you for watching this video. In this video, I will share to you some lessons about the writers and their writings during the period in Philippine literature known as period of nationalism. The title of this video is How the Literary Works of Rizal and His Contemporaries Can Inspire Our Life. And before I continue, one of the poems written during this period is the lyrics of our Philippine national anthem written by Jose Palma y Velasquez, and allow me to render the lyrics in English. Land of the morning, child of the sun returning, with fervor burning, thee do our souls adore. Land dear and holy, cradle of noble heroes, near shall invaders trample thy sacred shore. Ever within thy skies and through thy clouds and o'er thy hills and seas, till we behold the regions feel the throb of glorious liberty. Thy banner floats above us here, its sun and stars alight. Oh, never shall its shining field be dimmed by tyrant's might. Beautiful land of love, oh, land of light, in thine embrace these raptured to lie. But it is glory ever when thou art wont for us thy sons to suffer and die. The Filipino poetry in Spanish is the product of only a century and 4 decades. Compared with the long period of Spanish colonial rule of the Philippines, that is truly a brief existence. That poetry did make its appearance in the early years of the 19th century and from then on developed with considerable rapidity, particularly at the close of the Spanish rule. It's due to the certain definite causes, including the opening of the Suez Canal, the rise of the Filipino bourgeoisie, the establishment of elementary and secondary schools, and the introduction of the printing press. As Filipinos amassed wealth and property and inevitably acquired a measure of influence, social position, and education, there arose within them a burning desire to demonstrate their intellectual equality of the Spaniards and later with the Americans. This compelling desire found its most lucid expression in poetry. The first of our poets to express his thoughts and sentiments in Spanish was Don Jose de Vergara. He was once a member of the Spanish Cortes representing the Philippines in 1813. Writing poetry was his favorite pastime. He wrote a poem to the protector of Manila. Following in the footsteps of Vergara was Don Jose de Ataide. He was an officer in the Spanish infantry and devoted his leisure moments to poetry. His work reveals the soul and feeling of a philosopher-poet, like in his poem, The Man. The first Filipino poet in Spanish who published his poems in book form was Pedro Paterno. A collection of his poems, Sampaguitas y Poesías Varias, was first printed in Europe in 1880 and reprinted 5 times thereafter. Some aspects of Paterno's personality, such as his love for and sympathy with the common man and his sensitive awareness of the beauty of his country and his people, were expressed in his poetry, like in his poem Love of Filipino Workers. Another poet in Spanish who deserves consideration is Fernando Canon. He was one of Rizal's bosom classmates at the Ateneo. He wrote a poem, Ideal Flower. It's about his close friend Jose Rizal as one of his favorite themes. Now let's talk about the prose in Spanish. Pedro Pelaez and Jose Burgos were Filipino priests who had chiefly distinguished themselves in shaping reason to such an extent that one of them became a martyr to his own beliefs. Dr. Pedro Pelaez was an offspring of a Spanish father and a Tagalog mother. He was the holder of a doctorate degree in canon law and theology. One of the books written by Dr. Pelaez is Documentos sobre los Curados de Filipinas, which is nationalistic in purpose and sentiment, presenting documentary evidence against malpracticing Spanish curates. Jose Burgos, a literary talent, succeeded in writing some highly nationalistic essays. To drive home his point, he even addressed his article in La Verdad to the Spanish people. To the Spanish people, written in Spanish, was naturally read by Spaniards. Because of the lofty and noble cause he espoused and the dramatic death he suffered, Burgos eventually gained the fitting title Martyr of Bagumbayan. Now, the towering literary figure in Spanish is none other than Dr. Jose Rizal. Rizal was no man of sword, although he knew how to fence and could fire a pistol accurately. Instead, he used the instruments of reason and peace. To arouse the people from their lethargy and to bring about needed change, he made use of the pen. To carry out his lofty objective, Rizal became a ceaseless traveler, crossing continents to write and publish his books, and also to court active support from the leading thinkers and scientists of Europe. Wide reading and experience made Rizal distrust the efficiency of satire and direct assault on the worsening political and social problems of his day. So he began writing enthusiastically his novel in his own way, ironic for the most part, as he freely revealed the ignorance, cruelty, and greed of most Spaniards in the islands, as well as the apparent weaknesses and follies of his own people. Rizal completed his first novel, Noli Me Tangere. Unfortunately, he lacked money at this time to publish his own book and had to secure a loan from Dr. Maximo Viola to publish some 2,000 copies of his novel in Germany. To make the loan sufficient, Rizal subsisted on coffee and biscuits for weeks and discarded the entire chapter of Elias and Salome. Rizal maintained extreme equanimity of mind while enjoying his international success in Europe. In the meantime, he continued sharpening his pen, developing the inimitable skill of Voltaire and Jonathan Swift combined. In 1889, he followed his early literary success by publishing in Ghent, Belgium, the sequel to his novel El Filibusterismo, which he dedicated to the martyrs of Bagumbayan, Fathers Burgos, Gomez, and Zamora. In what many people of his time considered a mock trial, Rizal was soon found guilty of the high crime of treason and rebellion. Governor General Camilo Polavieja, a stern and intolerant man, upon receipt of the proceedings of the court-martial, at once decreed the execution of our nationalist on December 30, 1886. Noli Me Tangere, Rizal's first novel, was written in spirited Spanish prose to unveil the hypocrisy of the authorities and to open the eyes of the Filipinos to the abuses to which they were subjected. Its principal characters are Crisostomo Ibarra and Maria Clara. Noli Me Tangere is doubtless the best novel ever written by a Filipino. As a powerful and devastating denunciation of the unjust social and political conditions of our country, it ranks with Leo Tolstoy's Resurrection, Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin, and Hervey Allen's Anthony Adverse. El Filibusterismo is the sequel to Noli Me Tangere. It deals with the story of Simon the jeweler and his revolutionary misadventures in the islands. I would like to give my country, Rizal wrote to Dr. Ferdinand Blumentritt, an example that I do not write for glory and fame, but for my native land, and for this reason, I wish that my compatriots would sacrifice their passions for the sake of love of country. I wish that they not look after their welfare for the sake of honors, employments, gains, adulations, but for the virtue which distinguish and adorn countries that are free and independent. Memorias de un estudiante de Manila is Rizal's autobiography. Filipinas dentro de 100 años, the Philippines a century hence, is an analysis of Philippine conditions at that time. To destroy the allegations that the Filipinos were indolent, Rizal wrote the sobre la indolencia de los Filipinos, the indolence of the Filipinos. Rizal is perhaps the most quoted Filipino today. His prose always contains a stirring message that beats upon the pained heart of his people. It is persuasive and highly patriotic. The poetry of Jose Rizal was mostly written in Spanish. Considered the crowning glory of his early poetic achievement is A la Juventud Filipina. This poem was Rizal's winning entry in the poetry contest sponsored by the Lyceum of Arts and Letters of the University of Santo Tomas. Neo Tiro is a poem composed of 24 stanzas describing to his mother the actual world he lived in. Canto del Viajero was written by Rizal a few days before leaving to become a volunteer physician in war-torn Cuba. It reveals the depth of tragedy which Rizal endured while wandering in a foreign land. Vibrant in appeal and lofty in sentiment, Mi Ultimo Adios may be regarded as one of the great poems of our time. No man of letters in the Philippines has lived more beautifully, thought more nobly, and suffered more deeply than Jose Rizal. To complete the exposition of the 19th century nationalistic literature, attention should be given the works of Marcelo H. del Pilar, Graciano Lopez Jaena, Mariano Ponce, Antonio Luna, Jose Paganiban, and their contemporaries. Marcelo H. del Pilar is considered the greatest propagandist of his time. With satire and parody as weapons, del Pilar directed his writings against his targets. He produced several pieces of biting prose under pseudonyms like Dolores Manapat, Piping Dilat, L.O. Crami, Carmelo, and Plaridel. In 1889, he succeeded in acquiring the ownership of the paper La Solidaridad, which was first under the direction of Graciano Lopez Jaena. From then on, La Solidaridad came out regularly and the name Plaridel and La Solidaridad became interchangeable until del Pilar's death. La Solidaridad became the significant organ of the propagandist who, for reasons of security, had to use pseudonyms. Jose Rizal wrote as Laung Laan and Dimasalang, Mariano Ponce as Naning, Tikbalang, and Kalipulaco, Antonio Luna as Tagailog, Jose Maria Panganiban as Jomapa, Dominador Franco as Ramiro Franco, and Clemente Julieta as Juan Tatu. In the hands of del Pilar, La Solidaridad not merely served as a revolutionary paper, but also as a medium for education and reform. Del Pilar was able to write about 150 essays and 66 editorials. Some of his outstanding essays were El Dios Omnipotente, essays in rules of English syntax, and outlines of international code. His well-known editorials were Las Filipinas se pierden, the Philippines are being lost, Asimilación de Filipinas, assimilation of the Philippines, and La Redempción de Filipinas, redemption of the Philippines. One of the outstanding figures in the reform movement was Graciano Lopez Jaina. He was the founder and first editor of La Solidaridad. He was considered an oratorical genius. His compatriots regarded him highly, for he had the gift of the pen and the voice. He is reputed to have written a satirical play, Fray Butod. He wrote many essays, one of which is Liberty is a Myth. Antonio Luna y Novicio, brother of Juan Luna and a contemporary of Jose Rizal, first came into prominence as a contributor to La Solidaridad. Later, he founded La Independencia, a revolutionary newspaper published in Manila. The writings of Luna were expressive of his ardent desire for reforms in the Philippines. Luna's most important writings were Noche Buena, On Beso en Filipinas, Bailes de Máscara, La Maestra de mi Pueblo, and Impresiones Madrileños. He also wrote Por Madrid, a satire against Spaniards and their taxes. La Tertulia Filipinas, a graphic account of Filipino customs, and La Casa de Hispedes, a story about a boarding house. Un Beso en Filipinas is a story describing courtship in the Philippines and tells of the great difficulty encountered by a Filipino lover in trying to get a kiss from his sweetheart even on the eve of his departure. Bailes de Máscara is frankly satirical with considerable animation. It exposes the hypocrisy of the poor Spaniards playing the role of a rich aristocrat. La Maestra de mi Pueblo is the story of a school teacher. In this narrative, Luna gave expression to his ideas regarding the education and duties of a woman. Impresiones Madrileños is a charming account of the writer's own travels. It is Luna's most severe indictment against Spanish culture. Mariano Ponce belongs to the Reform movement. As a writer, Ponce was distinguished for his portrayal of his compatriots, notably Marcelo H. del Pilar and Graciano Lopez Jaina. Ponce was also the author of Una Excursión, a travelogue on Spain. Finally, he authored Cartas sobre la Revolución. Jose Panganiban wrote El Gobierno entre dos tendencias, Anatomía del Régimen, El Pensamiento, and La Universidad de Manila y su plan de estudio. He is reputed to have written some poems, among which were A Nuestro Obrero and Lupang Tinubuan and Sa Aking Buhay. As a writer, Panganiban believed in the grant of reform to the Philippines, freedom of the press, and academic freedom. Fernando Canon, a close friend of Rizal, was a writer who failed to cultivate his talents. He succeeded, however, in writing two short poems, Flor Ideal and Rizal the Artist. The prose in Spanish that developed in the later part of the 19th century was largely the work of men who took an active part in establishing the first Philippine Republic at Malolos, Bulacan. The important writers of this literary period were Pedro Paterno and Apolinario Mabini. Their eminent contemporaries were Felipe Calderon, Jose Alejandrino, Isabelo de los Reyes, and others. Pedro Paterno was the author of the modest volume of poetry, Sampaguitas y Poesías Varias, and Ninay, a novel in Philippine customs. Apolinario Mabini was not only a patriot, but also a prose writer. His longest prose work, La Revolución Filipina, is a political and historical treatise. Another literary work of Mabini that deserves consideration is El Verdadero Decálogo, the True Decalogue. It was written in spirited prose to bolster the patriotism of our people and to teach them their civic values. El Simil de Alejandro is Mabini's outstanding work as a staunch nationalist. Felipe Calderon was the distinguished author of the Malolos Constitution. His other important work is Memorias sobre la Revolución Filipinas, which offers excellent information to historians. Calderon edited La Revista Historias de Filipinas. Another revolutionist turned literatus is Jose M. Alejandrino. He wrote the La Senda del Sacrificio, which was translated into English by his son Jose Jr. under the title The Price of Freedom. Clemente Julieta was in his day a popular writer and journalist. The Causes of the Revolution is Julieta's best-known work. Antonio Rigidor, a contemporary of Rizal and Pedro Paterno, was also a literary man. Appearing under his name is Deportado por Filipinas, which appeared in La Solidaridad. Jose Castillo y Jimenez was the author of El Caputen o El Filibusterismo. Juan Guerra Alvarez was the author of 3 travel books, namely De Manila a Marianas, De Manila a Albay Viajero for Filipinos, and De Manila a Tayabas. Francisco Villa authored Escenas Filipinas. Now let's talk about the contemporary poetry in Spanish. The contemporary period in Philippine literature witnessed the decline of Filipino literature in Spanish despite the protracted compulsory teaching of the language in college. It is the Nobel Prize offered by the Jobel de Ayala family of Manila since 1921 that serves as a year-to-year encouragement to writers in Spanish. Government recognition for outstanding achievements in literature written in the 3 languages, Spanish, English, and Tagalog, is another encouragement. The Commonwealth Literary Award during the Commonwealth regime and the Republic Cultural Heritage Award comprise the recognition given by the government to exceptional literary works. The Carlos Palanca Memorial Awards in Literature has been given to short story writers and playwrights in English and Tagalog every year since the early 50s. In like manner, the Philippine Free Press gives annual awards for the best short stories in English. Finally, the Ramon Magsaysay Foundation gives awards in various fields including literature and journalism to distinguished men not only in the Philippines but also in Southeast Asia. Fernando Maria Guerrero, essayist and editorial writer, was the greatest lyric poet of his generation. Guerrero's important poems were collected in 1914 in a volume, Chrysalidas. The poem which expresses in liquid language Guerrero's ardent love for the Philippines are La Bandera, the flag, and Mi Patria, my motherland. His capacity in reproducing sound and color image is manifested in Maria Clara. Cecilio Apostol was an outstanding poet whose works were of singular beauty. In his poem in honor of Rizal, entitled Al Hero Nacional, or To the National Hero, Apostol poured out his heart strongly. This poem is recognized today as the finest ever written in honor of the great Filipino patriot. Jose Palma y Velasquez is the poet who wrote the famous lyrics for the Philippine national anthem. Emilio Jacinto, as an officer of the Katipunan, a secret revolutionary organization, used his pen in urging the Katipuneros to arise against Spain and in making sacrifices beyond the call of duty, and above all in maintaining proper decorum. Jacinto wrote 3 poems, A Mi Madre, A la Patria, the Motherland, and El Preso. Pacifico Victoriano's literary talent gained national distinction when his poem on Rizal won a prize. In 1933, Victoriano received the Nobel Prize for his work Arpegios. The best poems of Victoriano are The Great Martyr, Excelsior, and To Manila. Anselmo de Jesus y Vergara was a far more distinguished poet than many of his contemporaries. In the course of his short life, he was able to produce some lovely lyrics like El Hombre, A Mi Madre, La Sampaguita, and A Una Rosa, or To a Rose. Jesus Balmori was an outstanding creative artist in Spanish, known as Baticuling. Balmori excelled in poetry, satire, and narrative. To assert his lyrical prowess, Balmori won the grand prize for poetry in Spanish in the first Commonwealth literary contest with his Mi Casa de Nipa. Flavio Zaragoza Cano, Balmori's keen rival for poetic supremacy, was known for far and wide in the early 20s as a poet and essayist. His masterpiece, De Mactan Atirad, won for him the first Commonwealth Literary Contest in 1940. It is a sustained poetic account of the struggle of the Filipino people, represented by Lapu-Lapu, Bagot Banwa, and Del Pilar, to defend the battlefield of Mactan to Tirad Pass, the honor and freedom of their native land. Claro M. Recto had written for Spanish papers a sizable volume of poetry entitled Bajo los Cocoteros. Only two distinguished poems were written by him in the summer of his life, namely Mi Chozar de Nipar, My Nipahat, and Somos los Polios Mojados de Iwahig. We are wet chickens of Iwahig. Bajo los Cocoteros is passionate in appeal and nationalistic in temper, hence its poetic value. A lyric poet and a declaimer of distinction was Manuel Bernabe. Bernabe's half-century of writing was preserved in the following volumes: Cantos de Tropico, 1929, and Perfil de la Crista, 1958. He won the Nobel Prize twice for his translation of Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam and for his poetry El Hombre y la Mujer. Jose Hernandez Guevara, known merely as Renan de Juez, published Mi Copa Bohemia, his best poems, before World War II. In his collection of poems, De Mi Jardín Sinfónico, Hernandez Guevara revealed an unusual mastery of Spanish. The first major poetess in Spanish in the Philippines is undoubtedly Adelina Guria y Monasterio. Her poem A lo largo del camino won for her the Nobel Prize in 1955. Alejo Valdez Pica was a soldier poet whose constant literary excursions enabled him to share the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1934 with his winning literary work De la Vida, a collection of short novels or stories. Some of his poems are In the Quietness and Life is a Pain. Jolo Hilario is another contemporary Filipino poet who deserves attention. He produced 2 volumes of poetry, Adelphas and Patria y Redención. Jose Lauchenko joined the advertising staff of La Vanguardia, where he wrote occasional poems. Lauchenko's literary talent enabled him in 1945 to become secretary of La Academia Filipina, where he excelled in the art of public relations. Ramon Escoda won the Nobel Prize for his El Canto del Solitario, which represented his best prose poems. Coming from a talented family, Evangelina Guerrero Zacarias wrote poems and lyrical prose. She won the Nobel Prize in 1935 for her collection of prose and poetry entitled Kaleidoscope. Lorenzo Perez Tuel's first poems were published in Carnaval, a local publication in Spanish. Perez Tuels wrote a number of commendable poems, including La Canción del Amor y de la Guerra, or The Song of Love and War. Emeterio Barcelon was an indefatigable writer. He wrote studies of syntax as well as poetry. The poem that brought him close to the heart of all lovers of Hispano-Filipino poetry is Una Rosa de Luzon, or A Rose from Luzon. Vicente de Jesus received Nobel Award for Poetry in 1953 for his work Apollonius. Our discussion of the contemporary poetry in Spanish would be remiss if we neglect to mention the other Nobel Prize awardees. Trabajo Literario by Francisco Villanueva was the Nobel Prize winning entry of 1934. Antonio Fernandez won the 1937 Nobel Award in Poetry for his works Salmos de Oro and El Cruzado de la Soledad. The Lone Nobel Prize in 1957 went to Esperanza Lazaro de Baxter for her Romancero Sentimental. In 1960, Fernando de la Concepcion's Cumbre a Abismo won the Nobel Prize of that year. And Francisco Zaragoza was the recipient of the Nobel Award for Poetry in 1961 for his work Castalia Intima. That is all of the content of this video for today. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thanks a lot and take care always. So long, and watch out for my next video.